As I said before, I'm Ryan. Hi.
All right.
So, a quick review of the keyboard. So, this is a very visual part of it, and I feel like you guys will get more if you gather around and see these controls. So, this is the beautiful Nord Stage 2. Wonderful keyboard. You guys know. You're all keyboard players, right? Correct assumption? No.
I'm not.
Okay, so very visually, Nord has done a pretty good job of dividing things up. There's an organ section, the piano section, miscellaneous system settings, a synth section, an external section, and an effects section, all labeled on the top there. Which all of these controls belong to this synth, all of these controls, and so it breaks it up very nicely. The main volume for each section is this big knob at the top of each, and underneath that is this button which enables or disables each section individually. So you could have all three things going at the same time, very handy. Over here is the effects section, and all of these sections send their audio through the effects and then out into the world. The reverb and compressor section are global effects, which means anything that's coming out of the keyboard will be affected by these. These effects only apply to what you tell them to apply to. Now, there's 3 lights on each of these sections, which is when you're using splits, the lights will be different. So, if you want to have multiple sounds on different regions of the keyboard, you have to enable splits, and you can do a split labeled 2 or 3, which is how many sections you then have to play with. So this light tells you where the splits are, and when you turn off splits, all the lights turn off. But these are the options for where you can set your split points. So now, this is where the sounds will change. I'm just going to have the organ and the piano on, and if you double tap this, it starts to change. So now the piano is currently on the low part of the keyboard. The organ is still on the whole keyboard. So makes sense? Now the synth is only on the high part, but we don't hear it. Overall basic keyboardiness, good. Now if we dive into the different sections. Oh, if you could do 3 splits, and as you go, the lights have more options. So now this piano is only in the middle split, which is right here. If you only need those 7 notes. And you can move the splits with the shift key. Shift, hold, this is how the shift key always works. You hold the shift down, and then you press the other buttons, just like on the computer. So if you press the 3, it moves where the upper split is. If you press shift 2, it moves the lower split, and it jumps all the way back down here, and just keeps moving. So now the piano's in the middle, which is a bigger spot. So nothing down there, nothing up there, just in the middle. So let's dive into the sections a little bit. We'll start with the piano, because that's a lot of this. Like a lot of the options on this keyboard, this button rotates between the different types of what they dub pianos, with grand being grand pianos. This button shifts through different types of grand pianos. Oh, let's get rid of that. So each one's a little bit different, and I'm pretty arbitrary with my choice of which piano. I'll usually just start on whatever I have loaded into Piano 1 on mine, and I play it for a little while, and if I'm doing 2 songs back to back that are playing piano, I might just switch just because something a little different. Oof. Upright pianos. We don't need all that reverb. There's a few few of those too. Same thing. Looks like there's 4, and they'll tell you, Nord will tell you the names of them as you change them before it goes back to whatever preset you're on. So number 4 is the Saloon Upright. I don't think I've ever used that one. But I'm a big fan of using an upright sound. I think it's great on the... Sounds perfect for that. All right, electric piano. Same deal. Bunch of Rhodes. It looks like there's 6 of them loaded in here, and they got all different names, and pretty straightforward. They all vary a little bit with the same overall vibe. A lot of times when I'm coming into new songs or whatever, I'll literally just do what I just did, and next one, I just decide which one I want to use based on the sound I'm going for and who I'm trying to fit with, which we'll talk about some more. EP2, E-Piano 2 is Wurlitzers. Wurlitzers are a little bit different than Rhodes's. Rhodes keyboards is a hammer hitting a metal tine, and a Wurlitzer is hitting a wooden reed. They sound very similar, but the Wurlitzer is a little bit softer and doesn't sustain quite as long as a Rhodes. So it's sometimes a little cleaner if you don't want all that really long tones. Clavinets. Same thing, there's just different models of clavinets, but they're all really similar. Clavinets is where you get into this button up here, Clav EQ. Clav EQ high, and all these different lights. Clavinets have different pickups, like a guitar has pickups, so it will sound different with each button press here. Now, above this button it says Clav EQ high. Below the button it says Clav EQ. Whenever you're dealing with buttons that do multiple things, the lower text is the shift text. So as I press the button without shift, it's only doing things with these top lights. If I press shift, now it's the bottom lights. So you have the possibility to enable up to 4 different pickups for the clavinet. So you press it enough times and the 2 lights come on, and do it again without the shift, and so you've got all 4 pickups on. You can hear how it changes the sound a little bit. They're labeled brilliant, treble, medium, and soft. So that gives you an idea of the kind of sound that's going to come out with those. But to be honest, I don't use a lot of clavinet in churches. It just doesn't really seem to fit a lot. So that's enough of those. I don't need to turn all those off. Harpsichord. Also don't use that very often. But it works the same way as all the pianos, different models. That's the piano section. By default, what's labeled P-stick or pitch stick is by default turned off. And if you shift, because this text is under this button, if you shift, press this button, you can change these lights underneath it. Sustain pedal and pitch stick. With pitch stick turned on, let's go back to a piano. You can do that, which is fun, but not really necessary that often. And with the sustain pedal light off, it will not sustain. My foot is on the pedal. So that goes back to, if your sustain pedal is not working, make sure that light is on. Cool. Now, organ section.
What does that button do without the shift?
The text above it,
Oh, octave.
octave shift. So now, by default, the Nord will only let you go 1 octave either direction with a piano, unless you're split. Like if you have a split going and you have piano on the bottom, it'll let you go, oh, it wasn't even there. I was wrong. The Rhodeses, it'll let you shift more than one octave, but the piano, they don't want you to shift more than one octave because they think it's going to sound bad. But because if you go, so this is the regular top key. If you shift up an octave, there's just nothing above that. So if you shift 2 octaves, I don't know why they wouldn't let you do that. They should let you do that. Anyway, yes, octave shift. And it'll, again, tell you there before it goes back to the preset you're on. Piano, good. Organ, we'll deactivate the piano and activate the organ. So, by default, the organ does not have the rotary speaker enabled. The rotary speaker is one other effect that this keyboard has that can be applied to anything that is not over here with all the other effects, because it is pretty culturally connected to the organ. Without it, the organ is a little boring. Gives it a little more life. Do you guys know what a Leslie speaker is? Mm-hmm. Good. Now this, yes, we have the Leslie on this keyboard set to fast while the sustain pedal is depressed. Not sad, but put down. Never mind. So while my foot is on the pedal, it's going fast, and then it goes back to slow. You can also set it up to toggle, and I go back and forth as to which one I want to use, just depending on the situation, to where when you tap it, it changes, and then you can take your foot off the pedal and it stays at whatever speed it's on.
And we did that because you normally don't play an organ with a sustain pedal.
Right.
And we wanted to have something to cue in that sound, because that's what's going to give you a lot of the...
Yes. So that way you don't have to use a hand, because on a real organ, you'd be playing, and you'd have to use your hand to go flip a switch and then go back to whatever you're doing. But thanks to the sustain pedal, which isn't necessary, you can be using 2 hands, and you can still be using the sustain pedal to change that. The different settings for the organ are, the main one is the drawbars. Do we know what drawbars are like on an organ? Not a resounding yes. It doesn't look, I see some nods. Does anybody not know the drawbars on an organ? Perfect, I'll talk about it. So there are 9 of them. These buttons simulate pulling and pushing drawbars in and out of the organ. Right now, there are no drawbars. There's also no sound. The drawbars are related to harmonics of a note. So when you pull out the 3rd drawbar, it's the fundamental harmonic of that note. That's a C. As you pull out more drawbars, they are harmonics above C up here and below down here. So you get a 5th below, or a 4th below, which is the 5th, and then a whole octave below. If we put those away, you'll get a 5th above, and an octave, another 5th, I think another octave. One of those is the 3rd. So that's how the sound of the organ is constructed. If you're playing an organ, you'd be moving drawbars themselves, but this is what we have. The most common drawbar setting is just the first 3 pulled out, which, since this is the fundamental and those are 2 below it, it can get really muddy when you're playing in the middle of the keyboard like that, which would normally be fine on a piano. Nothing wrong with that. But down here, the same thing is a little much. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing an organ using this drawbar setting. If you put these 2 away and bring these 2 out, it's totally fine. The Hammond manual says specifically, don't ever pull all the drawbars out, which I think is hilarious and wonderful because it happens all the time. But that's, the biggest sound that an organ can make. as you play with the drawbars, you can really get familiar with what they can do with shapes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't know. So like I noticed you were always doing it in sets of 3. Would you ever do like?
That's just arbitrary.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
No, I meant, like first, second, third.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, and it just makes a different sound.
Totally.
And you can do, like, I was checking, on other models, there's a random preset for the drawbars. You can just press a series of keys to just do a randomized thing. But like one of the like default presets is like that kind of a thing, and you can just make shapes, and it's just a different sound. So like sometimes if I'm playing something on an organ and I'm using this setting to start with, and it's not really cutting through the mix, at least in my ears, like, it's like I wish I could just be a little heard a little more, I might do that just to bring out a little more high end, just to make it a little more audible. And I'll also, if it's too loud, I'll do the opposite and I'll back those off a little bit. Because it's still the same ratio of the harmonics to each other, they're just all a little bit quieter.
Can you talk about like just your way of approaching the style of what, like when you're using organ, you're not just like hitting quarter notes, like, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
you're not
So,
changing all of your.
Among the big differences between piano and organ is organ will sustain forever, piano will not. Organ doesn't have the same attack. Piano is really good at the beginning of the note. Like you can play a piano line and really cut through things. It doesn't have the same kind of cutting capabilities that the piano does. There are still other effects that we'll get to, but more often when I'm playing organ than when I'm playing piano is I'll do a lot more padding, and by padding I just mean holding chords, which is great because they'll hold forever. When I'm using an organ, I will also have a volume pedal, which can be an expression pedal in a keyboard like this, and I will use that to play with the volume a little bit. But what I'm doing is creating interest in what I'm doing with things other than notes. Because, if it's a piano and I just have a G to play for a long time, eventually that fades away, so I have to play other things. It might just be simple, but with an organ, with the sustain, it doesn't do as well doing the exact same thing. So I'm creating interest with volume and with the Leslie. So instead of playing some sort of melodic fill like on a piano, if I'm holding one note for a long time and there's an empty space between vocals, rather than play something different, I might just stay exactly where I am and just speed up the Leslie in that moment and use that as my fill. I will usually run the volume a little bit quieter on the organ side so that I have room to get louder. So if I'm just padding right here and it's starting to build, I'll build with a little bit of volume, things you can't do on the piano without playing harder. Oh yes, the organ does not respond to velocity. So pushing it softly produces the same amount of volume as hard. So I will give myself room to grow on organ volume as well, which sound guys hate that, but they have to deal. Now, was that?
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, and I've noticed that like when I've heard you play organ like that, there's a lot of movement while you're holding out a pad, like which.
Yes. So like if I'm padding a G, I might
It feels like you're always sustaining something even when you're moving to another chord, like
Yes.
because you don't have a
Right, you don't have a sustain pedal, so your fingers have to be a lot more acrobatic. Like if I'm going G to A, you know, there's a gap in between if you pick your whole hand up. So I might, you know, if you practice whatever you're doing with that sort of intentionality, your fingers will be able to start. You know, because they're kind of like 5 independent people walking around, rather than just hold a chord, sustain pedal, new chord. So instead of G to C with just picking up my whole hands, I might do where, you know, I'm slowly getting there, and it's really important to plan your moves before you do them on organ. So, you know, look at your next chord and figure out how you can get there with either the least amount of moving necessary or the most. But I, and it seems like most organ players, will try and connect point A to point B as best as I can. And since organ sustains, sometimes I'll just hold a high note for a long time, and with my pinky staying there the whole time, I might you can do that. And sometimes I'll just do that. There's my fill with the vibrato on the Leslie, and I'll, if the band's getting bigger, start pulling drawbars, more volume, put some overdrive, and you can get a lot out of one note on an organ, because you can't do that on piano.
And I feel like across all instruments, anyone who's a musician learning the lesson of less is more is really important, because playing a lot doesn't equal you're good and adding always.
Right.
And so yeah, that's, I mean, something like that might add way more than if we were really busy, depending on the context.
Yeah. The other thing with less is more on real organs, it's easier to replicate. It's a little trickier to do on the stage, but they do include this feature. Organs being an old analog sort of instrument, they have what's called sound robbing. So you press one note. Let's get rid of that overdrive. So keep listening to this top note. It's louder when it's the only note playing. The more notes you push down, the quieter overall that the organ gets. And that's just from the technology of the organs. Granted, the Nord could omit that and just be louder, but they included that part of it. So less is really more on the organ. That being said, it's still fun to just mash keys as an effect. I use this effect a lot, and you can just slide up to whatever chord you're going to. Sometimes, you know, just to, like, if the band is building into some huge moment, even if I've already got a big chord going on, I'll still have that just to drive, because it's fun.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And I know this is probably dependent on, you know, instruments you have in your band and the type of style of music, but in contemporary worship, I'm wondering, like, where organ fits in that?
Yes, organ, a lot of times, you know, if you're doing more gospel songs, it obviously fits there. That's when it gets more fun. But a lot of times organ can take the place of a synth pad because it sustains forever.
Yeah.
You can just use it that way. A lot of times what I'll do is, like, for really simple, you know, if it's like a ballad or a lower song and I'm not playing something, the single drawbar up high is really nice. You know, just depending on the song itself, but it can be a nice pad. And there's, one of the things that's going to connect to what we talk about later, organs naturally make sine waves. An organ with no Leslie and just the fundamental, that's a sine wave. And if we come over to the synth and make a sine wave, and we'll get here as a group. Now granted, this one was a little louder, but organs, just by virtue of their technology, are creating sine waves. And sine waves are a very common pad in modern keyboarding. I have been known to say that organ can fit on any song. I love organ, but it's just a matter of finding out how.
Yeah.
Most commonly, though, simple padding can fit a lot of songs that are played. Yeah, just by volume and Leslie. Now, in more rockin' songs, you can still pad and just make it a little more rockin' with some overdrive and up high and maybe double whatever the guitar player's playing. If he's got some line and you play it with him. Yeah, it's mostly padding, but it's just how you do it. Good on organ?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll quickly do the effects and then dig into synth stuff. Effects section, back to piano. Your effects are all right here. These buttons down here engage the different effects that you have available to you. And when you tap them twice, they will change what they are affecting. And they all operate kind of the same way, that way. These gray buttons do. So we have a piano turned on, which means our effects are going to need to be set to piano. Right now, there's no effect on that piano. If we move this from the organ, oh, it's set to pan. That's not going to do anything effective. There we go. It's easier to hear. You have 6 different effects here and 6 different effects here that you can choose one from at a time. These 2 knobs affect the effects that are enabled. So right now, effect 1 is being controlled. If you press this button, oh, we don't have an effect 2. This button toggles between the effects that you are changing. So this knob is the rate/tempo or speed, and this is the amount. So we've got a chorus loaded in this effects channel. So here it is without the effect. So if we speed it up and turn it all the way up,
It's beautiful.
slow, fast. And if you have 2 effects, then you're going to need to switch and make sure you are changing the knob that you want to change for the effect that you want to change. Both of these effects channels have 6 different effects to choose from. This third one is always delay. And if you turn it on, this light comes on, and now you can toggle between all 3. Delay, oh, it's on synth. The problem with these knobs is you can't see where these ones are set until you move them, and it jumps to where you moved it to. This is the amount of the delay, so if we want more, this knob, when it's on delay, when you move past 12 o'clock, will start, because this is the amount of the delay. All the way down, there's no delay. All the way up, it's only delay. So that's something to be aware of. So 12 o'clock is both fully. The feedback knob is how many times it's going to delay. So if you set it to 2, it should just be 2. If you go, we can even slow it down. So there's more. But if you turn it all the way to 10, it will feedback infinitely. Maybe not infinitely, but much more than 10. And then you can even change the rate while it's still going, and it eventually stops.
Use that a ton.
Yes, yeah, I use that a lot in church.
We should, though. We gotta find a way.
At the end of the last.
I will use a fair amount of delay on pianos in church, just not that crazily. I might have it around 4 or 5, and not quite all the way up, and then.
A good like real-time example for me when I think of delay and piano is Forever Rain, like a Nice Rhodes with
Oh, yeah.
like that little lead line isn't actually a guitar, it's actually a Rhodes. And guitars usually
There it
steal
is.
it from
Yes.
you all.
Yes.
It's not fair.
So if we wanted to do something like that, we could. This button is your tap tempo button, so.
It's cool.
Something like that. We could do a little more on the delay. That's not the right subdivision, but that's where you would do that. Back to the other effects. I don't use all of the effects. Like, I never use vibe. What does that one do? Yeah, that's why. That's why. And that's all the way up. I mean, if you used it artfully and brought it down, it could be a nifty thing, but I never use it. Choruses provide the effect of more than one keyboard doing the thing. There's 2 of those and a phaser. We'll turn it all the way up so it's easier to hear. Yeah, mostly what I'll use is chorus. I don't use the flangers ever. And sometimes I'll use wah depending on how funky we're getting. And tremolo is nice
Yeah,
on a
when you're doing
Rhodes.
Stevie Wonder.
Tremolo is a really common effect on Wurlitzers.
Oh, that's a good sound.
So those are these 3 effects. This is all just EQ and amp simulation. Turn this one on, and you can then boost lows. Mids. And highs. Maybe need to go higher for that one. And if you want to sound more like a guitar player, there are 3 different options for guitar amps to run your keyboards through.
Twin amp.
Now you can steal their licks.
Yeah. And then general overdrive for whatever is affected by this. It gets too much too quickly on this keyboard, I think. I mean, that's almost 7. Nobody's ever gonna want that. I might go 2 or 3 on that, maybe. 3 if I want a bit.
When we did that, like Dirty Roads, is that what you used for it?
Maybe.
Like that kind of more cutting through like attack?
Yeah, probably. So that's that.